any kind of free market-based exchange, there should always be two profits. The buyer profits and the seller profits, because each of them come away much better off afterward. Your income is determined by how many people you serve and how well you serve.
Hey everyone, it's Tamara Thompson with Broadcast Your Authority, and I'm so excited for this episode. I have a special guest with me today, Bob Burg. A little bit of the backstory there. I read several of his books as I went into my entrepreneurial journey. And just a lot of change came into my life after reading those books. Bob's the co-author and the international bestseller of The Go-Giver. Those of you that have not read The Go-Giver, you definitely should read The Go-Giver. He's a much sought-after speaker at sales and leadership conferences, and is super humble and an incredible human being. I've been following him for quite a few years. And for over 30 years, Bob has been successfully showing entrepreneurs, leaders, and sales professionals how to communicate their value and accelerate their business growth. So I'm super excited to have Bob here today. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Tamara. Great to be with y'all.
Yeah, and you're coming in from Florida, correct?
Yeah, Jupiter, Florida, near West Palm Beach.
Nice and sunny out there. We got some sun over here in Vegas today. So.
Yeah, all good. Yeah. Well, Vegas is a nice place.
Well, you've been you've been creating these books. When did you release your first book?
It was back in 1994. It was Endless Referrals, and the subtitle was Network Your Everyday Context into Sales. And that was back when I think there were 3 books basically on networking, mine and 2 others. Now, of course, there are hundreds of them, and they're all great, and I learned from every one of them. But back then, it was sort of a cool thing that there weren't a whole lot of us doing that, or at least writing about it. So that was a lot of fun.
What really drove you into this the essence of The Go-Giver? Like, why were you so passionate about creating this? Like, where was your monumental moment of just this creation?
Well, I mean, I was very lucky in having parents that embodied these traits. So it was something I got to grow up witnessing. And so I think that was an advantage. As I got into business, I started seeing different people doing things in different ways, and some were productive and some were counterproductive, and they were good examples and bad examples and so forth. But what I really came to see was that the people who were sustainably successful, profitable, happy, and these were people who all kind of had that instead of an I focus or a me focus, they tended to have an other focus. Now, not in a way that was the doormatty or martyrish or self-sacrificial, not at all. It was just a way of understanding that to the degree that you could focus on bringing immense value to others, to the marketplace, that was the degree to which you really created that benevolent context for your own success.
I love that. And for those that may not know or may not have read The Go-Giver or any of your editions, can you share a little bit more about what the premise of the book itself is for those that might not know?
Yeah, so it's with that understanding that shifting your focus, and this is really, I think, where it all begins, shifting your focus from getting to giving. Now, when we say giving in this context, we simply mean constantly and consistently providing immense value to others, understanding that doing so is not only a more fulfilling way of conducting business, it's the most financially profitable way as well, and not for any kind of woo-woo, way out there, magical, mystical type of reasons. Not at all. It actually makes very logical, very rational sense. Because when you're that person who can, again, sort of take your focus off yourself and place it on serving others, discovering their needs, their wants, their desires, looking at how you can solve their problems and challenges, how you can help move them closer to happiness, people feel good about you. Actually, they feel great about you. They want to get to know you. They like you. They trust you. They want to be in relationship with you. They want to do business with you. They want to certainly tell others about you and be your personal walking ambassador.
I love that. And I know that the book itself has the 5 laws that you talk about on that side. Could you give a quick overview of that for some of the people that don't know about the book quite yet?
Yeah. So the laws themselves are the laws of value, compensation, influence, authenticity, and receptivity. The law of value is all about the experience that you provide a person. And this is over and above the intrinsic value of your product or service, right? It's being that person who causes that other or that consumer to feel so good about themselves, right? So good about the situation, so good about you, that by the time you've done business with that person, they feel as though they've received much more in value than what they've paid, while of course you also make a very healthy profit. In any free market-based exchange, and when I say free market, I simply mean no one is forced to do business with anyone else. So in any kind of free market-based exchange, there should always be 2 profits, the buyer profits and the seller profits, because each of them come away much better off afterwards than they were beforehand. Now, law number 2 is the law of compensation. This says your income is determined by how many people you serve and how well you serve them. So this is really talking about impact. So while creating great value is, of course, foundational, it's also how many lives you touch.
Creates that ripple effect, basically. It really does. And I've seen this happen many times. I know Ben over here, one of my co-hosts, everybody on this co-host of time,
Bob, I could see you don't read it all with those books behind you.
He wrote them,
but
you're right. Them all.
I often say my house is comprised of books with some scattered furniture.
Exactly. Well, first of all, I love what you said. And it goes with networking. I wrote an article on the power of networking, and you touched on it. Is giving referrals, seek to understand before being understood, and giving referrals to help someone, because the universe will reward you back in stones with plenty of opportunities if you do that. I felt in business that if you give first, you'll always get back, but you have to give without expecting. And then when you do get it, you have to be receptive to receiving it. And that will allow you to have great success. So I really appreciate what you said.
Oh, thank you. I think what happens is when people say, well, I don't like networking, what they really mean is they don't like what they think networking is. Right. And that's that stereotypical fast walking, slick talking sales guy who shakes hands and backhands and slaps hands and sticks a business card into people's faces and says, hey, give me a call, got you a deal. Right. And that's the stereotypical networking thing. Right. That's not networking at all. I personally define networking, and I think this goes along with what you said, as the cultivating of mutually beneficial give and receive win-win relationships. But the key is to focus on the give part. What value can you give? And this is from the moment you meet that person, because again, just by focusing on them and asking them about their business and asking questions such as, how did you get started in your so-and-so biz? A question that people ordinarily are not asked because they're used to everybody else just kind of hitting them up with their product or service, right? Instead of asking about them, but you're focusing on them. When you're at an event where you're meeting people for the first time and you're in these one-on-one conversations, invest 99.9% of the conversation asking questions about themselves and their business. A great question to ask is simply, how can I know if someone I'm speaking with is a good prospective client for you? This is a question most people never hear. And when you do this, now you're positioning yourself right away in this person's mind as someone special, someone of value, someone who they would like to get to know better and create that relationship with.
I always feel that if you can let the other person talk more, you're always going to win. And with that being said, I agree with you. It's asking the right questions to know who's your perfect avatar, or who can I introduce you to that will help you grow your business, or maybe it's personal, maybe it's a resource. And so over time, I always felt that if you could become resource rich, you can create a lot of wealth because you can give more than you receive, and you'll see a lot of business come back to you in spades.
Yeah. In terms of focusing on the other person, I learned 40 years ago when I started in sales, and I was on the phone doing a lot of prospecting and so forth. That what I quickly discovered was that nobody ever hung up the phone on me while they were talking. It was really an amazing thing. If I'm talking about myself and my products, my services, they weren't that interested. If they're talking about themselves, they are totally connected. They are totally into this conversation. They are engaged. And I think we've all had this experience where, we've been in a conversation with someone who let us do practically all the talking about ourselves. And we came away from that conversation saying to ourselves, wow, what a fascinating conversationalist that person is.
It's so interesting. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, what's interesting about what you're saying is showing that respect of knowing their name. How important is it to know their name, Bob, when you are networking and to be able to reiterate their name in front of them?
Oh, so very important. And, I remember when I first started, that was a very horrible weakness of mine. And so I took a course. Again, this is about 40 years ago, so long ago. But I took a course on memory and how to remember people's names and faces, just because it was such a source, a weak spot for me. So there was something I needed to turn into a strength. But you're absolutely right. Dale Carnegie talked about it back in How to Win Friends and Influence People, right? That the sweetest sound to a person is his or her own name. So yeah, I think those little things that we do to make sure that we remember that person is just kind of puts us 9 steps ahead of the game in a 10-step game.
Do you guys want to jump in and ask him?
I always have like this, I listen to these things and I go, what's a good conversation point? Because I'm always like spinning my, and I go, I've been in situations where I agree, same thing. I want to make sure I'm giving and I do a lot, but then some people take advantage, they pull, and then it makes you want to give less. That makes sense. Not that I intentionally want to, but I go, gosh, as much as I want to give, like I've had people steal money from me. Like I'm sure you guys have been in this long enough.
Yeah.
People steal things and take it, and then you shut it off. And I've learned in my experience of life is when you shut off the wall for the bad, you also keep the good out. But how do you find yourself navigating those?
Well, you just nailed that one. So here's the thing. First, because I think with a title like The Go-Giver, the book, it's people might think that would happen. So I always like to just clarify that there is nothing about being a go-giver that is congruent with being taken advantage of. Mm-hmm. Right? Now people say, well, but could you be taken advantage of? Well, sure, anybody can be taken advantage of. And in life, it's going to happen sometimes, but it doesn't have to happen a lot. And yeah, I would say if you, not you, but if one is constantly finding themselves being taken advantage of by others, if one sees this as a pattern, then what they need to do is ask themselves, why is it that this happens so often? Because there's typically a reason. It's always unconscious. It's not something, I don't think anybody says, hey, who can I find to take advantage of me today, right? But if it's happening a lot, it is something that we're directing on an unconscious level.
I think it's also about tapping into your intuition too. If those things start happening in your life, going into it, like I would step back and be like, why am I attracting this?
Right. Well, that's the thing.
I'll learn from that example, because we've all had scenarios, things like years back. I think it was like 2015. My gut, there was a scenario where someone took advantage of my team and not myself, and my gut intuition in the beginning was we should not do business with this individual. And then I was always going back to, they were kind of coming in saying they were a go-giver, but then there's people that have this, that maybe they're trying, or maybe they just haven't got it right. But if they continuously do that to other people, then it's, I think, our intuition at the end, we finally say like, so I'm not going to attract that anymore.
To piggyback on that, Bob, when did you decide to write this book? Why did you need why did you think the world needed this book?
Okay, can I answer that question? But can I, if you wouldn't mind, just go back to what we were just talking about being taken advantage of? Because I think it really is very, very important. Then I'd love to answer your question. So there are people in the world who are what we call go takers. All right. And these are people who, that's just who they are. And it's what they do. They take. They feel they're entitled to do that, to take without having added value to the person, to the process, to the situation. And when we come across that person, we have a few options. And again, we first have to operate from an area of strength. So again, if someone finds themselves being taken advantage of constantly, they need to determine why that is. Is it something that they are putting out there and attracting? Are they looking for sympathy? And I'm not saying that's the case, but I'm saying there are a lot of reasons there's always an unconscious payoff for something we do, or we wouldn't do it. Okay. So, but once we understand, and again, we're operating from a place of strength. When we get those feelings, we have to watch for them. There's a reason we're getting that feeling. It doesn't necessarily because somebody does something that someone else did who did try to take advantage of you. That doesn't necessarily mean this person's going to, but it's something you keep in mind, right? But when you're dealing with a go-taker, and people might say, well, just don't do business with those people. Well, you know what? There's a lot of go-takers in the world, and we do have to do business with them until we get to a point where we can just, not, right? But they may have other, they still might be honest people. They still might have a good business. They might still have, but that is just who they are. What we need to do at that point, okay, is simply make sure that we consciously set guidelines and we consciously set boundaries, that we have things, expectations in writing that need to be in writing so that that person can't come back later and say, oh, but you said this and that, right? And all the things. Now we do it politely, respectfully, and tactfully, but we make sure that we protect ourselves and we continue to be a go-giver. We continue to bring value and focus on bringing value to them, but we're certainly not going to put ourselves in a situation to be taken advantage of. I hope that, makes sense in some way.
Definitely.
So in answer to the question, how, and please forgive me, it was how we came up with the idea of the book.
Yeah. What was the moment? Why did you feel the world needed the book? And I think in your last answer was a big part of answering my question. It was like, because there are go-givers and there are go-takers, and you need to know which one you are.
Yeah. And I think that a lot of people needed to know that not only could you operate from a base of integrity, if you will, operate from a base of wanting to make life better for others, not only could you do that and be profitable, but that it was the best way to be profitable. Because there are so many negative messages we get from the world around us regarding what business is. And unfortunately, sometimes even upper management in business, when they create a culture that is very negative, and somebody maybe works at a place like that, and that colors their thinking for all other places they go to, right? In sales for the rest of their lives, or entrepreneurship or business for the rest of their lives. So I think in a sense, and one of the bits of feedback that John David Mann and I received was that it's sort of that people felt like they were given permission to do what they wanted to do. Right? Not that they needed permission from us, but I guess as third-party credibility, if you will, that's something that the book gave them. And we kind of thought that the time was right for this message. Interestingly enough, the initial responders, I guess you'd call them early adopters of the book when it first came out, were not the people who needed the message at all. It was the people who had already built very significant businesses through doing these things long before they ever heard of the Go-Giver, right? It was who they were. It's what they did. And what they told us, and mainly in emails, was, this is what I've been trying to tell people in my organization, but no one believes me, right? Because again, they've all seen the same TV shows and read the same news articles and heard the same negative things about business. And so then the second group of responders were the people who learned about this from those people who used our book as, again, third-party credibility, telling them basically the same thing. We're just third party. And we all know how that works sometimes.
Oh, love this conversation. I think one of the things too is I know you talk a lot about like ways to find the best mentor for this, because I think when people have that aha moment, I was one of those people. But before I read the book, as soon as I read the book, I was like, oh, that's how I live. Like that's how I actually apply things already. I was like, I'm doing good things. That's like, I was like, this is good. I really resonated with it. So I was one of those people that came in and thought, well, and then I learned some more takeaways from it. But I think this book itself could be a point of mentorship for people to actually think about it more. It just opens that opportunity. But what do you think is the best way to find a mentor?
Well, and I think mentorship is very important, because finding a good mentor can really cut your learning curve by years and years. I think in terms of finding a good mentor, it's almost just important to know what not to do. And a mistake I see a lot of people making is they will approach someone that they respect, but that they don't know or have a relationship with. And that in itself is okay. But what they do is they'll come right out and say, hey, will you be my mentor? Now, there's a few things about that are rather counterproductive. One is that if you want this person to be your mentor, there's probably a lot of other people who do as well. And they only have really so much time to be able to give of themselves that way. And when you just come right out and say, will you be my mentor? That doesn't distinguish you. In fact, it maybe comes across a little bit entitled, like you're saying to this person, hey, would you share with me 30 years of your life and business experience, even though you don't know me from a hole in the wall, right? So we've got to remember first that a mentor-protege relationship is just that. It's a relationship, and it builds over time. Now, with that said, you can certainly approach that person, but what you might want to do is ask in a little bit different way, and it might sound something like, I know you're extremely busy, and if this is something you either don't have time to do or for whatever reason would just rather not, I'll absolutely understand. I'm wondering if I might ask you one or two very specific questions. Now, when you ask like that, you've done a few things. One is, again, you've come across respecting the process itself. You're not entitled. You realize this is a big ask, and that's how you're framing that. You've also given them an out or back door. You've let them know that if this is something they would rather not do, absolutely. People, love the feeling of autonomy. So when we give someone the out or back door, you basically, to the degree we do that, that's the degree they don't feel the need to take it, right? That's human nature. They also understand that you're honoring their choices, right? So that's second. But here's the third thing. Rather than just asking them if you could pick their brains or being general, you're very specific. You're saying, if I might ask you one or two very specific questions. This says to that person, all right, this person knows what they want. They have an agenda. Agenda in this context is positive, not, oh, they have an agenda. But, they have an agenda. They know what they want. They're not going to waste my time. They know what they want to ask, right? So they'll probably say, sure. Excuse me, I'm so sorry. How can I help? What can I do for you? Or they'll set up a time, whatever it happens to be. Now, you want to make sure to have really researched that person so that you don't ask anything that you could have found out online, because, again, that will come across in a counterproductive way. But you ask these couple of questions. You don't take up a lot of their time. You respectfully listen. You let them know that, how grateful you are and that you're going to apply their information, their wisdom right away. And would it be all right if I circled back and let you know how things are progressing? And they'll say, oh, sure, absolutely, please do. Okay, that's fine. Now, the next step, again, just my suggestion, is to write a handwritten, personalized thank you note to this person.
Ben's good.
Bob's speaking my language. First of all, I everything he's saying is like, I might as well lay on a couch because it's like music to my ears. It's so true. One of the things I do is, first of all, I totally agree with him. If you're prepared with questions, you build credibility, which I see a lot of younger folks don't do because they rush through instead of, let me research Bob Burg and ask him an intelligent question. The other thing that someone did to me lately, which I thought was brilliant, was he said, can I have 2.5 minutes of your time? And it really caught my attention. I'm like, he values my time. I'll give him 2.5 minutes. Now it turned into 20 minutes, but the fact he opened the door, I thought was brilliant. So that was a little trick I learned from a young man who came into my universe and said, can I have 2.5 minutes of your time? I thought that was pretty cool.
I love that. Yeah, no, I mean, everybody here has had some sort of mentorship over time, from either private mentorship to mastermind mentorships to multiple mastermind mentorship, and so I think it's a great thing to be able to have. So anybody that is listening to this,
do what he says. I get
Exactly.
today, everything
Go-Giver.
opposite of what he just was saying. I'm sitting here going like, this guy that just messaged today, I'm like, it was not done properly. Like, I'm looking for a mentor. I'd love, it's like, I get that you are, but like, I'm not looking for a mentee. So, it's interesting.
Yeah, our two goals are not aligning here, are they?
Do you guys have any other last thoughts? I respect Bob's time, and I'm grateful for him to be here today.
Yeah, me too. It's been enjoyable, man. I appreciate you. I appreciate your mind.
Oh,
Yeah.
thank you.
I'll be reading your book.
Hey, we've got a new one.
Oh,
We were talking about your book earlier, so I think I'm launching my book next year. So,
there you go.
but
Congratulations.
yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. So yeah, we're super excited. And if you could say just like one last thing to our audience, so going into 2024, some of these people, they've got successful businesses. A lot of them are investors that listen to this show. A lot of them, have this. They're building their own wealth, but some of them, might not be going in the go-giver direction at this point. But I think this is a good message for them to hear today.
Oh, thank you. It kind of reminds me of something a mentor of mine said years ago, and this was what we call a drive-by mentor, because we did not have any kind of formal mentor-protege relationship, didn't even know each other that well, but he said something so powerful, and I was ready to hear what he had to say. And so it to me, as far as I'm concerned, this was great mentorship. And he said, I was in a little bit of a sales slump, and he said to me, Burg, he said, if you want to make a lot of money in sales, he said, don't, and we could say in business, what have you, he said, don't have making money as your target. Your target is serving others. Then he said, now, when you hit the target, you'll get a reward, and that reward will come in the form of money, and you can do with that money whatever you choose. But never forget, he said, the money is simply the reward for hitting the target. It isn't the target itself. Your target is serving others.
Wow.
And with that said, what that said to me was that, great salesmanship is never about the salesperson, right? Great salesmanship is never about the product or service, as important as those are. That's never what it's about. Great salesmanship is about the other person. It's about the value you bring to another human being. In a sense, we could say it's about another person's life being better just because you are part of it. And I think when we frame sales and business from that point, that's when we're really facing in the right direction, and we're creating that, again, what we call benevolent context for success.
Well said.
Mic drop.
Yeah.
I was like, that's how to. No.
I wanted to say amen at the end of that.
I know, I did too. Amen. We were talking about a lot of stuff today on different shows. So, well, I'm super, super appreciative of you tapping in today virtually from Florida, Bob. And I recommend everybody that has not read The Go-Giver, read all editions of The Go-Giver. I like the purple one.
Thank you.
So I really appreciate it. Thanks to everybody else for tuning in. Be sure to subscribe, ring the bell, and we'll see you in the next episode. Thanks, everybody.